Welcome to Lesson 3, and this is page 6, and our lesson is Identifying Functions, Part 2. On our last lesson, we talked about and introduced how to identify a function. So our goal is today, I can determine whether a relation in ordered pairs, tables, or graphs represents a function. So let's go ahead and identify what a function is. A function is a rule that assigns each input exactly one output. So let's write that. So for instance, if the input was 3, it can only be matched with one other number. We could have 3 in paired with 5 as the output, but we couldn't again turn around and use 3 again and pair it with 6. Functions occur when every x value is associated with exactly one y value. So two different ways to say the same thing. When we deal with tables and ordered pairs, this is how we identify whether it's a function. To test whether or not a table or a set of ordered pairs represent a function, look to see if each input or x value has exactly one output or y value. And in graphs, if a graph represents a function, it should be able to pass the vertical line test. This means that any vertical line drawn on the graph should intersect the graph at exactly one point. Okay, so now let's look at the following set of situations to see if we can use what we just talked about. So it says determine whether or not the following representations are functions. Explain your thinking. So we're going to look at this table. So we're looking for every x value or input to have exactly one output or y value. So as we look at this, I can see that every x value is unique. Nothing is doubled. However, the y values are doubled up. But this 7 goes with -2, so the input has one output. There's no input that we see twice, meaning it's paired up with a separate number. So we could write, yes, this is a function, and that's because each input, and we might want to make it clear that that's an x value, has exactly one output. And we'll clarify that that's the y values. Our next situation, or our next relation, shows this relationship in ordered pairs. So in order to figure out the inputs and outputs in C, make them a little bit more clear, I prefer to highlight each one of the inputs. And as I scan and look, I can see that I have two numbers, or two ordered pairs with -2 as the input. But when I look at what they're matched up with, this is matched up with +1, this is matched up with +8. So -2 has two outputs. So this one is not a function. And by the way, let's clarify that two different outputs. For instance, if this would have been -2 and 1, and then we have seen -2 and 1 again, it would not be considered a different output. So let's move on. Now we're going to be looking at graphs, and we want to incorporate the vertical line test. And let's recall that again, vertical line test. It means that any vertical line drawn on the graph should intersect the graph at exactly 1 point. So when we do the vertical line test, we would be dropping several vertical lines, and this one hits the graphed figure here. This one hits the graph figure here. And as I continue to make vertical lines, and I'm just randomly writing them, I don't see any particular situation where it would hit the graphed line more than once. In fact, it might look that this is going straight down, but it's kind of going in an outward position, and so is this. Okay, kind of moving a little bit away. So this, yes, is a function because it passes a vertical line test. Our next graph looks somewhat similar, but is oriented a different way, different orientation. And again, if I drop any vertical line, in fact, the very first line I'm going to drop, I can see it hits my graph figure 1, 2, 3 spots. So just by using one vertical line, I can tell that it's no, because it does not pass the vertical line test. And finally, as we look at our last figure, number 5, our last graph, again, if I start dropping vertical lines, well, it touches my graph line here, touches my graph line here, touches my graph line here. So even the more I continue to write these, each of my vertical lines will only touch the graph line in one spot. So yes, it passes the vertical line test. So thank you for listening. I'm hoping you're taking notes, because tomorrow and for future lessons we're going to use this information. So tomorrow we're going to explore equations. Thank you.